Better Know Your Airmen is the official podcast of the 301st Fighter Wing. Join us for airman connections, leadership insight, mentorship, and happenings mixed with some fun and humor. Please understand that the views expressed in this podcast are not necessarily the views of the U.S. Air Force, nor the Air Force Reserve, and no endorsement of any person or business is ever intended.
Hello everyone, I'm Staff Sergeant Hightower here to give you November's base happenings. On November 4th, there will be a wing photo on the flight line. If you haven't heard about this, please get with your supervisor. On November 6th, there will be a change of command ceremony at 10 o'clock in the hangar. Colonel Harrison will be assuming command of the 301st Fighter Wing from Colonel Duckworth. On November 9th, the Chaplain's office will be hosting a poker night after duty hours. And lastly, there will be a Thanksgiving dinner giveaway Wednesday, November 16th from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. It'll be here on base in the parking lot of the Fleet and Family Support Center.
Thank you for listening to Better Know Your Airmen. We are your hosts,
Chaplain Mike Seaman
and Senior Master Sergeant Hansel Roscoe. You'll get to know us plenty during this podcast, but how well do you know our guest? And he's our first guest, born and raised in Lansdale, Pennsylvania. Did I say that correctly?
You did?
Yeah.
Awesome. And he is your 301st Command Chief, Chief Master Sergeant Michael S. Senigo. Welcome to Better Know Your Airmen.
Thank you.
Better Know Your Airmen, the show where we try to get to know our airmen better in case the title really didn't do it for you. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Chief.
Yeah.
Well, so you mentioned born in Lansdale. Most people don't know where that is. It's about 8 miles north of the Philadelphia city limits. And so I typically just reference that I grew up in Philadelphia.
Right.
And so for those that have heard me speak, they've heard this before, but I grew up playing a lot of sports in a pretty decent home, but I got mixed up with some not so good kids. And so some of my friends, great, and I still keep in contact with them, and some of them helped me get into some trouble. Yeah, so that led...
assisted you.
Yeah, I didn't have the best peer influence. Okay. It's very, very important. The people you hang around are very... very important. I've heard it said that you're the sum of the 5 people closest to you.
Wow.
And so at that point, that sum was probably pretty low on the
We're
scale.
in the negative numbers now, Chief.
Maybe. And
Gotta
so,
go back a little bit.
So to get to know me, I feel that's one of the most important parts about me is that I was expelled from public high school. Because of the things that I did and, based on some of my actions and the people that I hung around with not being a positive influence. And so that was a very important part of my life. And my parents, especially my mom, but my parents were a big part of that rescue plan and standing their ground against the school district that said I wasn't worth it.
Oh, wow.
And they said, just sign dropout papers. He's let him go hang out with his loser friends and...
hang out with the thugs.
Right. Yeah. And so they said I wasn't worth it because the school district would lose money if I went to the alternative school. And so my mom said, no, we're giving the alternative school a shot, even if it's the GED program. And so we took a tour, and I was like, okay, well, this isn't so bad. Yeah, I mean, it was school, but it was different. Yeah. I was, we're in our high school was so large, 9th grade had its own school. You freshmen didn't even go to the actual physical high school. The class sizes were 30, 35 kids to a teacher, and I'm a fairly dynamic person, and I don't like to sit still. And it wasn't engaging enough. As I look back, I can assess it wasn't engaging enough for me, and I was bored. So I think a lot of my actions were based on some boredom and being under challenged. And so when we went and got the tour of the school, where I found some pleasantries was that every person was by their first name. Everybody was by their first name. To me, it was very unique to call these adults and these superiors by their first name. And I think for the folks around the wing that know me, I tend to use first names a lot. And I think some insight to myself over the years has been I really prefer that because I feel that closeness when I look back, that intimacy of first names. And obviously respect our rank, right? When I'm speaking to folks senior to me and to our officers. I tend not to do that, right? So, so anyway, through that school and through my first real great opportunity with a mentor, making pizzas and cheesesteaks.
Who's your mentor?
So his name was Phil. He was the owner's son at Nino's Pizza Shop. He's about 10 years older than me, and he's the guy that kind of grabbed me by the scruff of the neck a couple times and was like, hey, don't go hang out with those guys. It's bad news. Nothing good is going to come of tonight. Just go home, go to bed. We'll see you in the morning. And so he started in the mornings. Phil and I on Saturday mornings, we would go out to breakfast, and we'd go eat breakfast somewhere. We would usually take his Dodge Viper, and
That's
occasionally,
incentive.
right?
Dodge Viper.
and he would occasionally let me drive it.
Oh, wow.
Which was pretty awesome.
That is.
So, but he invested in me, and that was really important. And that's kind of a big part of who I've become, and making sure I invest in other people. And so I really contribute between the teachers at the school and my parents and Phil and the team there at Nino's Pizza.
And a Dodge Viper.
And a Dodge Viper. That kind of shaped me into a lot of who I am today from, who I was. And so a lot of folks that I grew up with, when they see where I've been and done in the military, it's kind of like hard to believe. And I think a lot of folks in the military find it hard to believe of my backstory. And so for who I am on a personal level, that's been very important. I have a family, a wife, and 7 kids. So the 7 kids, we get a lot of questions. The number one question is, you know what causes that, right?
I've got a book, Chief. If you need, I got some pictures and everything.
And, but the kids are not all biologically mine. Only 2 are.
Okay.
3 my wife had before we met. And then as a reserve technician, we thought, hey, we're going to be here a long time. And we got our foster license when we were in Davis Monthan. And so 2 of the daughters we claim forever. One we legally adopted, and one aged out of the system. But she's 25 and doing well, and we've kept in touch, and we call her a daughter for life. So the kids are a little bit of everywhere, and people also look at us funny when I'm 42 years old, and I say I got 25-year-old and 24-year-old, all the way down to 6.
Right.
So.
So you've invested back in the community of people who have invested in you.
Absolutely.
Okay, Chief.
So you mentioned that you are the sum of the people that you surround, the 5 closest people, right? I'm screwing that whole thing up. As such, we're also doing a trivia game in this podcast, Chief. It's called Your Circle. So we went around your work center and we asked people to give us information about themselves that you should know about them. Like, you should already know about them. So we're going to ask you questions about them, and I hope you get the answers right. But just to be fair to you, I'll tell you who they are, and you'll get to pick who we ask you about first. Does that make sense?
Okay. So I have a little bit of control here. It's a little bit of trivia, like some Jeopardy, right?
Yeah. Right.
Okay.
So we have, to go down the list, we have Jennifer Anderson, and Miss Anna Hendrickson, also known as Tech Sergeant Anna Hendrickson, which is how I will address her. Staff Sergeant Najee Hightower, Tech Sergeant Nicole Earl, Chief Landon Bonds, Tech Sergeant Dustin Grantham, and the 301st Commander, Colonel Alan Duckworth. So, of those people, who shall I ask you about first?
Wow. So this is trivia. Is there points? Is there a prize?
Absolutely. Totally thought of that
Okay.
before we did this.
Okay.
There is a prize. I can't tell you what it is, though,
Yes.
because I don't want to
I'll
sway
just
your motivation.
have to
Yes.
pick behind door 1, 2, or 3 and see what I get at the end?
Yeah.
At the end.
All right. So is this Jeopardy, and we start with the 200, the easy question,
Let's
or
go
do I
for the
go right
daily
for the
double.
1,000?
Come on.
Yeah.
Daily double.
Go right for
Right.
daily double.
Double.
We'll just do one right now. We'll do the rest later.
So-
We'll do one now, the rest later.
Let's start with my wingman, Colonel Duckworth.
Okay.
Ooh.
Colonel Duckworth. What is his favorite spice?
His favorite spice. Wow. So I can think of a few things that are his favorites. like shrimp and grits. I know we're gonna go out places.
Pretty good.
Just not a spice.
I won't put a spice. Wow.
Just so people know, shrimp and grits
Grits
are
is
not
It's
spices.
not a spice. No. Well,
They
it
may
depends
be
on where
spicy,
you get. You could
yes,
get them
but
like
they're-
with a Cajun kick.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
could get them.
Wow. I don't.
All right, to
I
help
don't
you out
know
here,
that I can-
apparently he was hovering around some baked goods, and he kept talking about how something was lacking
okay.
something.
Okay.
And
That would be cinnamon.
there you
There
go.
you
That's
go.
the one.
Ding, ding,
Yep.
ding.
With a C.
There
Yes.
you go.
Cinnamon with a C.
Awesome.
Okay. All
Cross
right.
that one
I
out. So I'm
remember.
gonna ask you again. But yeah.
Okay.
It's pretty good. Hey, Chief, can you tell us why you enlisted in the Air Force?
Sure. So I think I hit a little bit on it in my intro about where I grew up. And so I came to that realization talking with Phil, my mentor there. And he said, hey, you gotta get out of here. Right. You got too many associates. You got too many of that. He didn't tell me about the 5, but what I perceive now is those 5 people around me. Too many of them are not going to help you if you stick around here. So I started to kind of think around, and one of my friends at the time, his brother had joined the Marines, and then I started thinking about the service in my family. So both of my grandfathers had served. I came to find out that both of them had served in World War II. My grandfather on my dad's side was actually a pilot. My grandfather on my mom's side was an infantryman in the Army. And my dad was drafted into Vietnam. And I'll throw out a little nugget here. My parents were hippies. And when I mean hippies, they legitimately attended Woodstock.
All right.
awesome.
That's pretty
Right.
good.
And so their friend group was not necessarily excited about what was going on.
Right.
And I'll say it was a solidifying moment of my grandfather accepting my dad when his draft number came up and he went because other people in the area were not.
Flocking
And
to
they
Canada.
Were, right, they were going
Yeah.
to Canada and fleeing.
Yeah.
And so so that was a moment for a veteran, World War II veteran, soon-to-be father-in-law, that really cemented his belief in my dad. So my dad was an MP in Vietnam, and as I started thinking, I'm the youngest of 3 siblings. They're not serving. Maybe my way out of here is to carry on the family legacy and be at least the 3rd generation to serve. So I went to a recruiter. We also had a tour from our alternative school.
Okay.
We also took a tour of Willow Grove Naval Air Station,
I've
Joint
served
Reserve Base. Yep.
Yeah.
And
Nice
so
base.
that's just a few miles from my parents' house and my alternative school that I went to. And everybody there from the Joint Base said, "Go Air Force." So I walked into the recruiter's office in Willow Grove and I said, "Hey, I'd like to join the Air Force and I want to be an MP." And he said, "I have the job for you."
All right.
You're every recruiter's dream. Right there.
I
Right.
want to be an EMP.
Yeah.
Security forces,
Yeah.
here
Yes.
I come.
So
Yeah.
he pops in, yes.
They lead the way, I hear.
Yeah.
Yes, I already gave away my age earlier, but yes, he popped in the VHS tape and showed me folks riding dirt bikes and ATVs with boonie hats and camoed up
That's
faces
what
and an
Colonel
M16
Carter does all the time.
on their back.
Yeah.
He plays VHS.
Right?
Yeah.
And yeah. So that's what kind of got me serving, was a little bit of I need to do something with my life.
Yeah.
And my family had served, and this was a good opportunity to do both.
Okay.
I saw in your bio that you played a role in Joint Task Force Katrina.
So I was in security forces for about 5 years, with 9/11 kicking off. I was at the 820th Security Forces Group at Moody at the time. We were standing up a squadron when 9/11 happened. And if you're not familiar, the 820th Security Forces is now 820th Base Defense group, and the 3 squadrons, primarily of defenders, goes in to stand up and establish air bases. Okay. And so that was our job, and 9/11 kicked off. So guess what? I spent almost the next 3 years deployed on kind of the leading edge, right? Opening Pakistan, Afghanistan, Djibouti. Well, in all of those places, they were full of special operations and rescue. And so I had that mentoring moment.
Is that Ghost Walkers?
Ghost Walkers is the 824th.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so
hung out with some of those guys.
Okay. We actually
That is such an awesome name.
we actually deployed prior to the 824th
Right.
officially standing up. And so I had that mentor moment where a couple of the folks said, "Hey, you seem pretty sharp. We see you out running and fit. Would you be interested in checking out the helicopter and the gunship and seeing the guns?" And I said, "Yes." So
Show me a gun.
Right, right. And so then I was hooked. I'm like, "You mean I can do this?" And so they helped me through the retraining process, and I had that mentorship again in my career. And so I got to be an aerial gunner. And when I went through and I retrained, I went back to Moody Air Force Base in my first rescue squadron, and I was working in our supply office, so I kind of stayed the night prior. I was supposed to fly the next night training line, and the initial request came in for just a couple of helicopters. So I stayed making sure that we got them cots and stuff and got them out the door. And the next day I was, getting ready, kind of awake, getting ready to fly my night sortie, and I got a phone call. "Hey, get your butt in here and bring a 3-day bag. You're going to Katrina." And I was like, wow. What? I had not flown without an instructor previously.
Oh, wow.
And so I got to go out for my first flight without an instructor sitting with me or behind me and go into, we flew from Moody to Jackson, to the guard base there at Jackson, Mississippi is where we staged. And we actually slept on cots in the chapel.
Oh, wow.
Oh.
And so the second day we went out and just got to it. And just an incredible experience getting to execute what you've been training for.
Yeah.
And, it goes to the mission statement here, train and deploy combat ready airmen. And in this case, we were doing humanitarian operations. But that's what we trained for those missions. And it was so rewarding, just so eye-opening to have, water up to second, third story of some buildings, seeing cars underwater, and just the devastation was mind-blowing. Just bubbling up from gas lines and seeing stuff, and people congregating on bridges, rooftops, and we were just, it was a race to get as many people as quick as we could. But at the same time, it wasn't just about the sheer numbers for us. There were other helicopters that were not rescue designated. They weren't hoist equipped.
Okay.
So we realized quickly, the first couple we went out, and it was just fit as many people into the helicopter as you could, landing on a bridge. And then we started realizing there's people stranded on balconies. Oh. There's people stranded on rooftops of houses and apartments that don't have the weight rating for a helicopter to get there. Right. And their only chance was with hoist. So it was pretty neat. One of the coolest things, I think, was that I legitimately at a couple points we were fitting so many people in the helicopter, I would put kids up on my radio console and a couple kids in my seat, and I would sit on the windowsill with my feet hanging out, just with my gunner's belt holding in to fit more people in the aircraft. I would literally sit on.
That has to be the coolest experience.
It was so neat. And so, and then we got into more precision hoist work and going after those, onesie, twosies, 4 or 5 people that were stuck in those high-rise apartments and whatnot, balconies and
wow.
And it was so neat. I'll never forget that experience. So I got to serve out there for 10 days, I believe, and I put in a lot. We were flying. I think I flew 72 hours there, 9 days of flying at 8 hours a day. Wow. And in total, our crew, we were well over 100. But again, we had primarily focused on the hoist work. But to see just the chaos, the joint services coming together, we ended up with AWACS coming in, helping with control. People were able to relay. The first couple days, I mean, there was no problem finding people for probably the first 4 or 5 days. Getting into day 6, 7, 8, and it got a little bit more sparse each day, which was good. We were all making progress.
Right.
Did you know where you were going in those helicopters? Like, were you told where to go, or was it each helicopter was just out there looking?
When we took off so we had 20.
No surveying done prior to.
We had 20 Pave Hawks out there, which I think is the largest contingent of Air Force rescue that maybe has ever happened. Active Guard Reserve, everybody was there, and when we took off, it was just get to New Orleans and go find people.
Oh, wow.
And so towards the end, we would take the pararescuemen with boats, and we would go land in a parking lot somewhere and offload their boats. They would inflate them, and they would go around and try to. They started helping with the kind of door-to-door searches, and then we would go off and try to find more people. And I'll say that's probably the most rewarding experience during that was we're flying along, and I look out my window, and it was just, we hadn't seen anybody. We did get to the point, back to your previous question, yes, we did get to a point as it thinned out where we started doing grid searches and trying to call areas clear. But initially it was just a free-for-all. Wow. So we were kind of out and about, and we're searching our area, and all of a sudden this guy sticks his arm out the window of a house. Mind you, this is 9-10 days after the hurricane. The water is still halfway up this house. And this guy sticks his arm out the window, and he starts waving a white T-shirt. And so at that moment, I start my directive calls. Hey, I got survivors, 9 o'clock low, turn left 90 degrees, and we circle around, and we start prepping the hoist, and we get the PJ down, and bring up the wife first. Then we bring up the husband, and they get in the aircraft. She sits down, and I would usually try to give them a bottle of water or something. She sits down, and she just breaks down crying.
Wow.
And she says, thank you. We've been arguing for a week, and the moment we finally decided we're going to do this, you were there. And it was just like such an incredible moment.
Chief.
So
wow.
It was I'd hold that whole week, that whole timeline in very high regard.
Let's continue on your circle game. And do I need to repeat the names back to you, Chief?
Not yet. Not not out of my mind yet. I think I got most of them. So let's go with I'll say one of the probably further out ones. So I'll be excited if I can remember this. But let's go with Tech Sergeant Earl from Medical.
Okay. In a conversation that you had during the MDS morale event this past UTA, she learned that you had been going for your LPC, but you stopped. So, what degree is she working towards?
Thank you for that passive push on one of my incompletions in my life.
No, not an incompletion. A lesson.
But Sergeant Earl, who I'm very impressed with, and impressed with the work she's doing. She's working on, I believe it's through University of Texas, Arlington. She's working on a graduate degree in social work, and I know currently she's focusing on some crisis management with teenagers, and it's very noble.
Yeah, that's correct. All right, you're 2 for 2.
Wow, that's pretty good.
All right. I did need a hint on the first one. I'll give you that.
That's all right. You'll move through this pretty quickly. Chief, what was your most difficult assignment? I mean, we've looked at 15 assignments on your bio.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot.
That's a lot of assignments.
Yeah.
It's a lot. Yeah, I've been around.
First 10 were active duty, I believe the first 9.
I would have stopped taking assignments just because I would have had to put them on my bio. That's,
No mas.
You know, I didn't think about a bio for most of them, right? In all reality, I think I was probably a master sergeant when I first did a bio. And shameless plug, I would recommend starting them as a tech because it creates less to fill in later.
yeah.
But,
I second
wow. I think for me mentally, the hardest part assignment-wise was the deployment to Djibouti, Africa, the first time.
Really?
Yeah.
I've always wanted to go there, but
So I've gotten to go
what?
twice,
Yeah.
but
Only been once myself.
so for
Okay.
one,
Both of you guys is real flexing on me. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
initially I was loving it. Hottest place
Oh,
I've ever been.
best sermon on hell I've ever
Wow.
had, you know, because it is hot.
Yeah. So, and initially there were some really cool things, and I have probably the closest person that I've lost to me throughout my service. I served with there. He was a Navy SEAL, petty officer, Matthew Mason, who perished. Now I'm thinking back to the year. I want to say it was 2011 in Extortion Force 7 in Afghanistan. But I used to run with Matt and a couple of the SEALs. We met at a MWR relay race where I got to edge out Rick, the lead, the SEAL team lead.
Really?
And,
That's a great moment.
Somebody pointed out and they go, "Oh man, the SEAls are here and we don't have a shot." And instantly Rick points at me and he goes, "Fastest guy here." And I was like, wow, all right. And we led off in this relay race. We were head to head for a while, and about a mile and a quarter, I finally got him to shed off my heels. But
Wow.
but after that, I built a relationship with those guys and got to run and hang out with those guys. They would try to get me in the gym, but it was just so embarrassing when they're, benching 300, and I'm like, all right, let's take off all but one set of 45s. I just was like, let's just run together.
Yeah.
But during that deployment, while it started out very interesting, and we, the living conditions got better quickly, and it stunk because it was so hot, and there was a pool, but we all had their smallpox vaccines, and they didn't want to open the pool, and we finally got them to open the pool, but it was supposed to be a 90-day deployment, and I can't remember all of them, but at one point I was only home for 66 days between deployments. When I said I lived deployed for almost 3 years, I mean, it was pretty close. And so it was another deployment gone. It was different than, Pakistan or Afghanistan. It was a different pace doing the terrorism stuff down there.
Okay.
And then we had this other big thing kicking off in Iraq. And so we were supposed to be there 90 days, and about 80 days in, they said, hey, our replacements got shifted to Jordan. Don't worry, the next ones are coming to replace us. We're delayed a week, don't worry. And so we kind of lived that for almost 3 months. Our deployment was extended about a week at a time because of the buildup for Iraq. And then ultimately we were there during the invasion of Iraq. But they kept sending what was initially supposed to be our replacements. And so we were there just shy, I want to say it was 172 days.
Okay.
So we're just shy of that full 6 months. And so that was a tough time to go a week at a time calling back home, hey, you got to that point of disbelief, right?
Wow.
Hey, I'll be home when I get home. I don't know when that's going to be, right?
Wow.
And so it was I think that was probably my most challenging point.
Well, I got another challenge for you. Another name for your circle game. Who
Who do I want? Let's go with Miss Anderson.
All right, so one thing about Jen that everyone should know, what is it? And a hint, it's not anything surface level that like she's married or anything like that. It's just something that she's a big fan of that apparently everyone knows or should know. I felt like that one was probably the hardest question.
Does that add pressure?
That is tough.
Everybody
Yeah.
knows this.
That's how she.
Yeah.
So what I would like everybody to know, I don't know if this is the correct answer, but what I would like everyone to know is that she is a veteran.
I didn't know that.
I think a lot of people don't know that. Right.
Yeah.
And I respect that, and I respect her service, and so I think a lot of people don't know that about her, that she is a veteran herself.
That's not the answer.
That's not the answer, but that's a good answer.
Good
I'll
answer.
say that.
Okay.
Excellent
Because
answer.
I didn't know that.
Nothing else is coming to my mind, but it's, when you've worked with somebody for over 2 years, something it might be something very routine that's just not sticking out to me.
Could be. She's an animal lover.
Oh, yep. See, that's just a day in, day out thing. Yeah. She doesn't just take care of their animals.
2 for 3, Chief. Not bad.
Doesn't just take care of their animals, but she also will take care of needy animals in the neighborhood. Yeah. So so I probably should have been able to point that out.
That's okay.
She'll walk
you
down.
surprised me with
like
something.
I said,
We'd almost give him a half point.
I didn't have
for
a
that.
way to ask that question. I didn't have a way to ask.
I'm at 2. I don't know who's
2.5
the official score. You're
for
the
3.
ranking. You're the ranking.
2.5 for 3. I work for Roscoe. What are you talking about?
It's true. No, I'm just kidding.
Chief, let me ask you a question. Do you remember the first day of basic? And what was the most important lesson of that day?
I remember some of my first day, but I remember the pick 'em up. I remember being dropped off at basic training. Dropped off at the recruiting station by my mom and my grandmother.
Okay.
They were crying. And that's where there was a very large lack of self-awareness on my part. So I'm like, what's the big deal? Right? Like, I'm just going to do this thing. And they were crying, and I'm like, I guess I don't understand why. And I remember the drive with the recruiter to the airport, final processing through Philly Maps and get to the airport, and this is the first time I've flown in my life.
Oh, wow.
And I got a nosebleed on the flight. And so I don't know if I mentally didn't quite know what was going on, and my body was having some reactions. And I don't know just how quickly they give you vaccines, but when they went to draw blood very quickly in basic training, my blood spurted out.
Wow.
What?
Yeah, it was very unusual.
Is that like high blood pressure? I don't know if that's how that works, but
So I don't know. It was very interesting. So the biggest lesson that I learned was there was probably some large lack of communication with my recruiter. Now, the initial recruiter I had, he had retired or moved. There was a lack of communication.
Okay.
So what I do remember in the first day of basic training is they had to give me a hygiene kit because they never provided me a list of what to show up with.
Oh.
So I pretty much just showed up and
Smiling. Here I am, world.
me and the clothes on my back and a smile.
Oh, wow.
And I remember them being upset with me, and I'm like, nobody told me to pack a toothbrush or shaving kit or.
Well, this is the first time you've been that far away from home, too, isn't it?
So
wow, on a plane, nosebleed,
no toothbrush,
no toothbrush.
So it was the first time probably the furthest I'd been away from home without family. But while we had never flown, we had driven on cross country from Philadelphia all the way out as far west as Arizona.
Right.
What was your first day of OTS, right? Or did you, Well, what was that? What was that like for you?
Oh man, it's the first time I had somebody get up my face and cuss at me.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm sure that went well when you found out you were a chaplain.
It did. I retaliated. Everywhere my instructor went, I interrupted him with a salute. And man, he would be chewing somebody out, and I would go, "Sir," boom, like that. And he would just have to stop what he was doing and return the salute and the greeting of the day. So after a couple of weeks of that, he came up and apologized about that MF he used as he leaned on me, telling me that I was going to learn to march today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that brings up an interesting point, I guess, just about basic for me. And this is not a slight at all on our military training and instructors, and I respect what they do, but I was not intimidated.
Oh, I wasn't either.
Growing up and working in that pizza shop, all I could think was, you're supposed to scare me? Mrs. Nino, Phil's mom, would put them to shame. We needed to give her, and rest in peace. Unfortunately, she passed about a year ago. But give her, she could teach them a thing or two on intimidation. I mean, she had me so well trained before I went that it was like, oh, okay. Oh, you want me to go? All right, that's what I got to do.
I was a chaplain's kid at Chapel 8 for like 3.5 years. When he leaned up in me and said what he said, I thought, oh, precious. We're going to have fun now, baby.
Yeah.
I didn't mind yet the yelling. It was just that I had to play the game, right? So it's like I had to be careful how I answered, and that was the most frustrating part for me, because it was like, why'd you think that? I'm like, well, funny story, and it's like they don't have time for that,
Yeah, but for me, after 2 weeks, they gave you your cross. Oh, and that's when the fun began.
I showed up with a Batman belt buckle. It was great.
Ooh.
Yeah, they called me Boy Wonder for a bit.
Boy Wonder.
But then I kept falling asleep everywhere, so I just got called Sleepy.
My wife at a student always
So my nickname changed.
called him Botman. Botman.
Botman. Nice. That's an awesome way to say that. You have hobbies, just like anybody else
Hobbies,
does.
yes.
And one of them is golf for some reason.
Because it's fun.
So what about golf? Sorry. What is it about golf that you enjoy? Because you said you played other sports, right?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. What were the other sports that you played?
Well, so I grew up playing hockey. Not as much ice hockey as I would like. It was tough on the parents' budget. Ice hockey is an expensive sport.
Is it?
So soccer was in our budget, and baseball. Loved playing catcher in baseball. And those were the primary. And then growing up in the military and traveling a lot, I got into cycling, triathlons. For a while there, I was a competitive triathlete, runner up to a marathon. In fact, I did one ultra marathon. When I was in Arizona, I did a lot of rock climbing. I really fell in love with rock climbing. I probably left out skateboarding. I guess X Games brought that around as officially as a sport.
Yeah.
In fact, skateboarding and I got into rollerblading when that was like brand new, and actually had, I want to say, 4 if not 5 friends that were in a real tight-knit circle that were in the X Games and on TV. And I'm like, oh, cool, that's Andre Engelhardt, or that's Brandon Fabiani, and
So this is name dropping.
Name dropping.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I had a few of those guys.
That's awesome.
So
so you did all those sports, and then you found. Then how do you go to golf from all that?
So, what I found in golf is that it's a time-consuming event that I can also do solo if need be. So rock climbing is not something that you do solo. I really enjoy kayaking. Also, to me, not the most fun solo. I do occasionally, but not as much as I do or would if I had somebody routinely going with me. So some of the safety aspects, I enjoy hiking and trail running, but sometimes there's that safety aspect. I met my wife through volunteer search and rescue in Tucson. And
what?
Wow.
Yeah. So having other people in the outdoors makes it more enjoyable for me, whereas some people like that total solitude. But fishing, And I know that Chaplain and I razz each other about their two types of fishermen.
Yeah.
Real fishermen, as he says, that use live bait, and those that throw car parts.
Car part.
Fisherman or fisher of men? You are a chaplain.
I
so
am
which
both
one?
of those things.
Okay.
Fisher of men and a non-car part thrower kind of thing.
Yeah.
Car parts.
Lures. He refers to lures as car parts.
But you just said that I recently heard you tell a story how you caught a bass with like a frog or something.
Yes, but that is fly fishing, brother. That's not throwing car parts.
That's not.
That is talking to the trout. That is having communication
I feel like it's
with
the same
animal.
thing, Chief. What do you? I don't know. It sounds the same.
Nah, ask any fly fisherman. They tell you they don't throw car parts.
Right. Okay. So what's the difference between the car part and your frog?
Homemade, not a car.
If he made it at home, if he made a lure at home, you would accept
If
it?
he'd be a fly fisherman, he would not be a thrower of car parts.
Okay.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
So in throwing car parts, you're just dragging for fish.
Yeah.
Hook them by the gill. Hook them where that
Yeah.
multi-hook grabs them. This is fly fishing. Is talking to the animal, speaking to them.
So there's a stretch there to me. I just enjoy fishing, and
Yes,
so
we
I
all
enjoy fishing, but I also enjoy golf. And so golf, what I like about it is it reels me back in to bring in a
Nice
fishing
pun.
analogy, right? It reels me back into sometimes you want to go big, right? I like to do big things. I like to make big progress, but golf is living proof to me. There's so many little leadership lessons that I love to take away from golf. In fact, I wrote, because I'm a bit of a nerd, I wrote a little bit of leadership lessons from golf paper.
Okay.
And some of it is that 250, sometimes if I got a nice tailwind, close to 300 yard or more drive.
Totally.
That counts as one stroke just as much as a 1-inch putt. You got to tap that in. And so in life, where are we getting those wins, right? What counts? And everything counts, whether it's a mile we got to go to achieve a mission or an inch to achieve that mission. And sometimes we don't need to go for wrapping and fishing here the big fish. Sometimes, fishing with my kids this summer down at in South Padre Island and Port Isabel in very, very South Texas, my kids were just having a ball catching, minnow or bait fish off the dock. They didn't care. I'm casting out far. I'm trying to catch these drum and catch these big fish. But my kids were just having a blast, just scooping them up with the net or catching them on a tiny little hook. And I think that's what I like about golf sometimes, is that it grounds me back to where are we managing risk. I could take that big shot, but you know what? I could probably get it closer to the hole in 2 than trying to take 1, 2, or 3, than try to take that one big shot. So I enjoy that, and I really picked it up, quite honestly, more when I moved to Robbins. And I was living in a camper on base without the family being in San Antonio. I had more time on my hands. And so being that it's a more time-consuming but not overwhelmingly physical sport, was a 2-for-1 win.
Chief, your time at Robbins, I was at Robbins at the same time, and I lived right next to the first hole. So you came within 20 yards of me most of your career down there.
You might have some of my golf balls.
You probably were one or two people I chased out of my yard.
Dang.
Get out of here. Get back on the course.
So you guys were there at the same time? The same time frame? We were, and you and I, Chief, were at the 433rd at the same time, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
my job though in the 433rd wasn't overly connected with the wing,
Right,
though.
because you were the TRS. You were in the TRS squadron, right?
Right, but not even the 433rd TRS. We worked in the 344th TRS, an active duty squadron is where my office was, and I was connected with the 733rd. But we've actually moved those positions now, those 7 positions, to the 340th Flying Training Group.
Yeah.
So,
Awesome.
yeah.
Well, speaking of, taking big shots, let's talk about more of your circle and the big shots in that list.
Well, I just got a text on my, I can see it on my watch here from Chief Bonds. So I think that's a good time to bring up Chief Bonds.
All right, Chief Bonds. He is in an adult league for what sport?
Oh, that's easy. Hockey.
Yeah.
I've actually gone to a game.
He mentioned
maybe two. Yeah.
Okay. His other questions were, what's his wife's name? But I didn't want to ask it.
His wife's
I was like,
name,
let's do it the hockey one.
His wife's name is Tracy.
Okay.
And
nice.
she is very
that
nice.
That makes up for the other one.
You're going to give him a half point on that. So
1.5.
1.5. All right.
Yeah.
Excellent. Chief, when you were in basic, did you make a friend in basic? And what was that bonding moment in basic, making that friend? And just a follow-on question. I feel like I'm part of the press corps. Do you still keep up with that friend?
So in basic, I had a lot of friends because I like to believe I'm very good with attention to detail, which is what a lot of basic involves. So using the tweezers to tweak the T-shirt folding and get that all right and perfect. But some of those friends also maybe gave me $1 T-shirt or so, and so I was probably a little bit, running my side hustle.
Basic was profitable. Yeah,
running my little side hustle there.
Is that could you incriminate yourself? Like
no,
this?
not this late.
Statute of
7 years, I think.
Were you taxed on this?
Ooh, no wonder they've added more agents.
Yeah.
So, I believe he was in my brother flight during basic.
Okay.
But then we were in Security Forces Tech School together.
Okay.
Mark Mayhew. And he had separated, and he's back in Ohio. But we do keep in touch. And so I can't remember. I remember more of our times and kind of hanging out and going getting, Burger King or going to the bowling alley on Lackland with him. I believe more so from our time in tech school than basic. But
did you go to the Chaparral Rec Center?
I did.
What year was that?
1999.
I wasn't. I used to be the civilian that ran that Chaparral Rec Center.
Yeah.
Golly.
Yeah. Yeah, we had to make our escape from the as it was termed, the jailhouse at the Security Forces dorm. So.
Wow. Yeah, I still keep up with, a friend from tech school, basic training. I'd seen some of them around, out in the operational force. When I was deployed, I bumped into old friend, bumped into one of my basic training buddies, and my drill sergeant. That sent shock through me.
Yeah.
As I opened the door to Security Forces, and then he just walks out nonchalantly, and I was like, "Holy crap!" I just froze, and I went and took a picture. I tracked him down after that, and I took a picture with him and stuff, and it was good time.
Yeah. I ran in when I was working at AFRC. I ran into one of my tech school instructors that had since commissioned, and he was Lieutenant Colonel Dustin Pollock out there.
No, yeah, I think I know him.
Great guy.
Yeah.
So it was pretty neat. I was sitting in the commander's update brief one day, and I'm just looking at this guy going, I know him.
I've heard that voice before.
And
why doesn't he intimidate me?
Right.
Do I hear the clicking of heels when he talks?
Yeah. And there was he spoke that day, so there was 3 people lined up to talk to him after. So I just patiently waited, and I walked up and I said, "Sir, were you a Security Forces Tech School instructor?" And he goes, "Yeah." "How do you know that?" And I said, "You were one of my instructors." And he's like, there were a lot of folks, and I said, "That's good. That means I stayed in the middle ground, right?"
Yeah.
As a former tech school instructor myself, you tend to remember the really good and some of the really bad. And so if you kind of rode it through in the middle there, it's harder to stick out years later.
Yeah. We tried. We try.
Yeah.
All right, let's get another one of these down here.
All right. Let's
see
go with Technical Sergeant Dustin Grantham for, I'll say 2,400 since he's a 24, one of our active duty members.
Wow, this one's such an easy one.
Oh, yeah.
Where's he originally from?
Oh, he's from right here in it's just outside of the Dallas area of Texas.
There you go.
Yeah. He's a big Eagles fan this week, though.
Is he?
I heard he shifted his support. Yeah. How did that happen, Chief?
Well, being from the Philadelphia area and, being a Phillies, Eagles, Sixers, Flyers fan, he got a little feisty this week, thinking that last week, that the Dallas Cowboys were gonna beat the 5-0 Eagles, and so myself and Master Sergeant Miracle Carter in command post, both Eagles fans, and he got a little feisty, and he threw down the challenge to write on the back window of the car, for the opposite team. If your team won, so his back window says "Fly Eagles Fly, 6-0, baby."
Oh man, that's a safety issue.
Yeah,
he did
riding home. He could get gunned down, right?
Yes, and
would put a target on his back, almost literally.
Right, being that he's currently living out there east of Dallas with his family and helping take care of their ranch out there.
Yeah.
He quickly realized, oh man, what did I get myself into?
He's like, no, I lost the bet. Like he's like on the highway, just explained to everybody.
And
the state patrol pulls you over. Yeah, it's pretty bad.
Safety's there, and his confidence was so high that he was not concerned about that. And I would and I honestly feel a little bit bad about fulfilling that promise, but I was at 7:29 standing at the door of O'Reilly Monday morning when they opened at 7:30. Technically 7:31, they were a minute behind, and I timed my trip in that morning to get my coffee, and at Panera, no federal endorsement intended there.
None taken.
And
for Panera or O'Reilly's?
Well, neither I guess, but I do get my coffee in the mornings on the way in there, and
if you'd like to get a coffee from Panera too, now's
I have a
Here's
SIP
a word
club,
from our sponsors.
SIP club
Panera
membership.
bread is the best.
Yeah.
Their SIP club membership just did go up. It was $8.99. I think it's now $10 or $11.99. But trust me, I get my money's worth.
They're losing money on you.
On me.
Yes.
Yes. So, but I'll just take this time to point out that my hair is still growing back. Because, we did put down a big challenge,
yes,
and the commander and I fulfilled that. And so, I think with integrity intact, Dustin, needed to fulfill his challenge.
I've seen pictures, and it looks like he has fulfilled his obligation. Until when? Friday?
It's for a week, so
Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, we're flying out for a TDY next week, so I'm not going to check his car at the airport Monday. So we'll see how
to the airport either. I mean, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't park near him.
So he's been a good sport about it.
Good.
So.
Good.
You've been geographically separated in your service on several times. Besides wife and children, what is the most difficult part of being a geo bachelor or a geo bachelorette from both points of view, if you could?
Wow. The easy answer you took away with the wife and children.
I did, sir.
So that's a challenge, but I think probably the biggest challenge is being able to speak to that and having conversations with other people who are considering it. And where sometimes I say, I feel like I might be a hypocrite, but if you can avoid the geo bachelor life, do it. It's different. The first time I did it, our son, who's 24, was a senior in high school, and if the family had moved to the Pentagon, which we felt a very strong calling and belief that, and I talked to a bunch of my mentors, that it was the right thing to do was take that assignment. My assumption was I've deployed a bunch. I've gone TDY a ton. We've done this before. And let me tell you, the difference that's there is tremendous. Because when you're TDY or deployed, you're with your team.
Right.
When you're at a permanent duty assignment, they're going back home to their families.
To their team.
That's true.
Right. And I didn't have another, in the sense of living there, single person to hang out with. And that's where I had to find, I picked up some of my trail running stuff a little bit, and I found a park nearby, but I had to find how do I create this new balance? Because deployed, I had, hey,
right.
we're gonna wake up at this time, we're gonna run, we're gonna go to the gym, we're gonna meet and go to the DFAC. Where you didn't have that for me. It was I went through some lonely times there, and and as an extrovert, it was a challenge. My wife, as an introvert, that's a dream, right?
Yeah, I share that a little bit. Yeah.
Oh no, I'm gonna stay in this. I also a lack of foresight. When I went that first time, I lived in a rented room in a house, and there's no windows. It was a basement bedroom.
Oh.
And so I didn't think about the fact that it was very dark. And so I would spend time sitting on the patio and stuff. And the couple that I had stayed with, they were very nice. And he worked at the Pentagon as well. And it was decent accommodations. But it's a challenge for us. We had to make that decision. And in fact, Sergeant Childs and I were talking about this for medical the other day. And he said, I feel like you've got to have a really strong family to make that happen. And I said, that's the exact thing that my wife and I had talked about. And we said, we are strong enough for this.
Yeah, I agree with you, Chief. That's a whole different world than deploying, geobaching it. A lot of issues there. And as reservists, we find ourselves doing that a lot more than what we planned, as geobaching it.
Yeah, I'd say it's surprising. It's not just as reservists.
Right.
There's a lot of active duty. You'll see chiefs, seniors, chiefs, and colonels that they kind of get to that point where the family has said,
this is the last assignment. You go do this. We're staying here.
Right. Or at least we need to stay here for a little while. And
our son or our daughter's graduating from this and that.
Yeah, and I feel like the Air Force, not, some of the rules don't apply to us in the reserve, but for active duty, I believe there's a program now called the High School Senior Program, where they'll allow them to kind of defer and hold off on assignment for a child to, Now, that's hard when you got as many kids as I do, right? But we also don't have that opportunity the same way that active duty does on the reserve.
Right.
So, but I've had some mentorship moments and talked to people that have said, what do you think? And I appreciate that I'm able to share my experience, and I kind of advise against it, if you can do it at all costs,
Yeah, I agree. It's a lonely place.
Well, I mean, I'm a geographically separated bachelor myself, as in I have not found my wife.
Right.
Wherever she is out there. How did you meet her? You sit through that program, but what was,
So
did you ask her out for coffee? What's going on here?
No.
What moves did you
So
pull?
there's some very interesting connections here, but you have the medical training, but you also have kind of field skills training in which through my background doing, enjoying hiking and outdoors and rock climbing, I had some of those. Plus, being in combat search and rescue, I had a lot of those skill sets, thoughts.
You had the cool factor.
You did.
But my very first training, I met this couple, and their last name was Paquette. And I said, hey, their last name's Paquette, and you live here in Arizona. Do you know a guy named Calvin Paquette? And they look at each other and kind of giggle, and they go, yeah, kind of. And I said, he's your son, isn't he? And they said, he is. Well, I had just come off of my active duty assignment, where I was still active duty at the time, just come off my active duty assignment with Calvin Paquette in Iceland.
Oh, wow.
That's cool.
And so now I'm volunteering with his parents. So what a small world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so my wife had been in the organization about a year prior to me. And then when I start my medical training, one of the requirements for the medical, to get your final sign off on things is that you do your training, you go out and you can start going on your rescues. But when the next class comes in, you have to be the victims, right? And it's twofold. One, they need the victims. Two, being the victim sees it from a different perspective.
Yeah.
And now you're maybe not even consciously thinking about it, but you're assessing, hey, I've been through this. Oh, you're messing this up, or
Right.
I wouldn't do it this way, or you're maybe learning, right? And it's also reinforcing.
That's how you do that.
Right.
Yeah.
You're also reinforcing the principles and those skill sets and refreshing some of that information. Yeah. So she was one of our victims because she was a year ahead of me. Mm-hmm. And so Mark Paquette was walking her back inside through the house that all the equipment and stuff and vehicles were staged at for this rescue team. And she's walking back in because one of my classmates had her as a victim. Well, she had an elbow injury, and they used blood, fake blood, of course.
Yes.
If they use real blood, I got other questions for this.
Right.
It's going to be my side
So,
gig. How to make more money.
Well, we were also, I won't get too deep here, but we also were part of the search and rescue dog team. Mm-hmm. And so we do use real human hair, real human teeth
for the
and
dogs.
Things for the dogs to be able to find.
The hair part I wasn't shocked about. The teeth part a little bit I am.
Also,
How were they obtained?
Also maybe and up to as grotesque, close your ears if you're squeamish, placentas.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah. So, right. So they're walking through because my buddy Brian saw her elbow injury, and you have to look for potential second injuries. Well, her elbow blood had leaked and dripped onto her pants. So he saw blood on her pants, and she's, giving him the hey man, it's literally just my elbow. I'm conscious. You don't have to overthink this. And he goes, I see blood. I need to expose it. And he takes the shears and snips all the way up the pants, all the way up to the hip.
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Oh, no.
So she's walking through the house with her leg,
Oh, no.
bare.
Because someone cut up her good jeans?
No. They have part of what they keep in this house is bags and bags full of throwaway.
Yeah, I was going to say, if that was her good jeans, somebody's...
Stuff that the Salvation Army or Goodwill would not even try to sell.
And she didn't stop.
So,
She was like, no, seriously.
yeah. So we're kind of crossing paths, and, Mark had it in his head of like, hey, I need to introduce these two. And there was somebody else on the team that was, she was in on it. Mm-hmm. And so we're walking by and he goes, oh, hey, Crystal, let me introduce you to Mike. He's, one of the newest members on the team. And we're standing there talking, and she's kind of got that awkward thing. And it just, it was one of those moments where I'm like, there was just that air about her that I just knew. And she had, I said 3 kids. She had the 3 kids out there playing victims as well.
Wow.
And so that gave me a special appreciation for who she was and when we got to talk. And so we actually talked because I had never dated and I was not a father prior. We definitely took our time. And so it was about 6 months of kind of some talking, and I had some other involvements at the moment. And so I was working away from some of those as we started to talk a little bit more and realized there was really something to it before we actually went on our first date.
Wow, so, that's pretty cool.
So, speaking of people that you talk to on a daily basis, not like that, but we got 2 more people on this list.
I believe there was also Miss Anna Hendrickson.
Yes.
We have not gone there yet. Okay.
So she lives with...
Also, I'm sorry, you wanted to refer to her as Technical Sergeant Anna Hendrickson.
Right, but she wanted me to say Miss Andrews, and I will respect that.
That's how I primarily interact with her on a daily.
That's what she told me. I should have really stuck with that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, so she lives with and takes care of some people. Who are those people?
She has the noble challenge of helping out her parents.
Yes.
Yeah, and she is a wonderful person, and she's so passionate about family, and she provides us updates, and she goes through some challenges, with trying to balance taking care of them, and I'm really I'm proud of how good of a job she does with us and being present.
Yes,
as she
awesome.
still takes care of both of her parents, and it's her passion for her family is very admirable and
honorable. Yes.
Very.
So you did a golf tournament on Tuesday, is that correct?
I did.
How did that go? How did you
go?
do?
Well, my game. Well,
Chief, looking off in a distance is not helping you.
I was.
Is that shame?
I'm not sure. Look at those eyes.
So I had the distinct honor and privilege.
Oh, now we're wording it in a very noble way.
To play with a team on behalf of Folds of Honor in a tournament.
There you go.
No federal endorsement intended. As well as the Allen Academy, which is in the State College area, which is where this tournament was. So I took a day of leave, contributing to a nonprofit organization. But I got to play on a team with our maintenance group commander, Colonel Nemechek, who is a large advocate and volunteer. I believe he's the Southern or South Texas director for Folds of Honor. Mm-hmm. And his wife, Diane, is an event planner for the organization. And so I joined up with him and a gentleman that many of you probably heard of, if we have any listeners. Hopefully we do.
We're going to have two.
We're going to have
maybe
a few.
Three.
But I got to play with the former 20th Chief of Staff of the United States Air Force, General Mark Welsh. And then we had an additional retired colonel that General Welsh plays golf with there in the state. Him and Colonel Nemechek were definitely carrying me through for sure.
Really?
Okay. They're the long ball hitters and pretty good.
And the leadership lessons.
Leadership lessons. And so I had a bit of an off day, some unusual. I hit about 5 just topper shots, just shank stuff that I maybe hit once every 2 or 3 rounds, one shot.
Starstruck, maybe.
Maybe. I don't feel that way. General Welsh is so kind, so easygoing. I don't feel like that.
Okay, it wasn't that.
It was interesting. We had went to dinner the night prior with them and got to sit next to him. He did some speaking in the beginning, and so I was really, really excited that he remembered my first name.
Wow.
The next day, Chief.
Gotcha. Okay. Right. So you led me into that one.
Right,
so I stepped right in it.
Chief in general is how it was, but so sometimes in a tournament, you in a scramble tournament, when you don't have to play your ball, you try some shots that, or maybe try a little too hard, try to put a little extra on it when you just need to hit your good shot. And I think I got in my head a little bit of like, we've taken some of my shots, but maybe I need to hit a couple of really good ones, and I probably tried a little hard.
Contribute to the team.
I definitely hit some contributing shots, and so, but there were a few that I was a little embarrassed and ashamed of. So
that's okay. We've been there.
But it was incredible. Yeah. It was incredible, and one of the gentlemen that I met, who's on the board of directors, is a Gold Star father, and to be there, and recently I volunteered with TAPS, not the TAPS most of us in the military think about, transition assistance, but with the tragedy assistance program for survivors, and also no federal endorsement intended. They're nonprofit, but they are what they do is incredible to take care of the family, whether they're Gold Star family affiliated or somebody that was lost. In the most recent one here in Grapevine was all for surviving family members of suicide. And those organizations are a strong reminder that not only can we be taken care of through the Air Force and the government, but there are so many incredible resources out there that will take us, and it strengthens my will to serve, and knowing that our airmen are taken care of when we ask them to do hard things.
What was your best career moment as a staff sergeant?
We have your bio here in case you don't remember when it was you were
as a staff sergeant,
and where your assignments were at that time.
Yeah, we have that.
I'm thinking I probably know what you're alluding to here, but I had to think back because staff sergeant I think is the longest rank that I held, so that was the longest part there, and so I had to think back.
All right.
Because I was also in multiple AFSCs,
okay.
Right? But I'm going to have to go back, and Hurricane Katrina always comes to mind, but this is in similar relation. So that was, my first flight without an instructor was Hurricane Katrina, but my first combat deployment as an aerial gunner after the retrain, we ended up called out. We were deployed to Iraq.
Okay.
And we were doing support for, we were also doing support for the highest of high level of special operations going on, and where we would pre-position on essentially a nightly basis with some of these very, very high level operations going on throughout Iraq. And one night, sitting at a small operating base just outside of Baghdad, and you would sit there, and it could be tedious, right? You'd fly. Sometimes it was 20, 30 minutes to get out to the operation, and sometimes you'd fly 2 hours. Sometimes you'd fly and you'd take a 3-day bag, and you'd stay out there for a week and live off of a 3-day bag. And this particular night, because we're out of Balad, we only had about a 20, maybe 30-minute flight. And most of those evenings, you sit and you leave the auxiliary power unit on and keep the radios on, and you just hang out and wait, ready to go in case something bad happens. And turns out our special operators are pretty dang good. So they don't make a ton of mistakes, and they're very methodical and very well researched, and intelligence is strong. And so some people get very bored with that. One night we're sitting there, and all of a sudden I hear, "Mayday, Mayday, Mayday," come across the radio, and there was an "oh bleep" out of my mind. That's our guys. And my crew perks up, and the special operations team that we had was they like to go and lay down outside the helicopter on the ground and space out and stretch out. And I said, "That's our guys. We got to go." And it was, "Yeah, it is. Holy crap." And so scramble, 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 and that's when we start. The helicopter's ready. You just start pushing buttons to start the helicopter, and I'm screaming, telling the guys to get in. If you don't, some people take maybe their body armor vest off to not be sweating so much, and or we'd be sitting with a headset versus our helmet. I apologize for those. You can't see my hand motions on the podcast, but we got a big helmet, so it's much nicer, much cooler if you physically have on your headset versus a helmet. And so we're starting to listen, and all of a sudden we realize we've got around 25 special operations and 2 helicopters on the ground right where they were about to go prosecute some missions. Right at the spot. And so we knew that was going to be potentially hot landing zone. And 6 minutes after that Mayday call, we were off the ground, 10 minutes later, we were at the site.
In the heat of the moment.
In the heat of the moment, and we went in, and I won't go into all the details, but we eventually had everything from airborne ISR platforms, AC-130, AH-64, some other special operations helicopters, and we had to go into that hot landing zone 3 times. First time to put the teams in, second time to unfortunately drop off some equipment because it was more severe, and including body bags that we had to drop off on that second iteration, and the third time to pick out the passengers, the survivors that needed immediate attention and to get flown into the Baghdad casualty hospital. After all that, I got, we kind of wrapped up, and they had called in a ground convoy to come help take care of some of the other folks, and some of the other we call them ambulatory walking survivors from the mishap were able to get on some of the other helicopters while we focused on the injured. We got them the support and help they needed, and then got back to Balad, and I'll never forget my buddy Billy comes running over and cheering and gives me a big old chest bump, and we got the big one, right? We sit around. That's why we prepare. That's why we prep. That was the put me in the game, and I guess maybe 8 months, maybe even a year later, found out that we ended up earning the Rescue Mission of the Year year for the entire Air Force.
Oh, geez.
So
yeah, congratulations. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah,
it's a deep memory there. Stays with you all your days, does it not?
It does. In fact, there's an envelope sitting on my bookcase behind my desk from General North, Lieutenant General Gary North at the time, who's now retired General 4-star Gary North, that in this job I have now interacted with him on, I think, 3 different occasions, and it's just so humbling to think that I'm so excited that he sent me, me and all of our crews, the 2 crews, a personal note to say congratulations on winning that, and thank you for doing that mission. And now I've gotten to meet him. It's pretty neat.
That's pretty deep. Oh,
yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that is. Well,
last question.
So one more.
One more.
I'm going to try to dig through my memory bank real quick here.
Staff Sergeant
Hightower.
Najee Hightower.
All right.
our PA.
Yeah, she accidentally texted you once. Who was that text actually meant for?
Now, I met this young man, and I remember some of his story. The text said something along the lines of...
Who was it meant for?
Oh, you don't want me to say what it was?
Yeah, I'd like to hear what it was.
Well,
I've had your accidental text towards me. Go ahead.
It was very clearly not for me.
Yeah.
It wasn't inappropriate, I'll say that.
Good.
But I could tell by the comma and then the nickname that it was not meant for me, because I would not have that kind of an unprofessional relationship.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so, but that gentleman is a prior Marine, and I believe now does some IT work here in the local area. And I believe his name is Jay.
I think it's Joe.
Joe.
But I don't
Joe.
I think.
Joe. Yeah.
And-
but I
and-
did meet
and-
him at the Air Force Ball, and I do recall that.
What is Joe to her?
A Valentine.
A Valentine.
Significant other.
Yeah, something that might
other.
be, Joe is her boyfriend, and
That was an awesome one.
Chief, that's pretty good. I've got him at about 6.5 on the score, don't you?
Well, he got the bonus question for Chief Bonds as well. So.
Oh, wow.
Tracy. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Chief.
pretty good.
Any shout outs you'd like to give while we wrap this up?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say thanks to the 2 of you, to Chaplain and to Senior Orozco, and this is really cool. I've had the honor once of being on a podcast for another organization, and I feel like podcasts are really neat. I enjoy listening to them as I travel quite a bit, going between San Antonio and
this
Fort
one's gonna
Worth.
be a good one.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I'm really excited, and I hope that it really catches on and is successful in our wing. And I appreciate you bringing that to it, and bringing your skills as a multi-capable airman, right? Having your film background and experience and bringing that here. So I appreciate that, and I appreciate the opportunity, and I'm honored to be the first guest of what I hope to be many.
Our first victim.
You're the
First
first, the
victim,
worst,
man.
and the best. So,
Yes, I get to claim them all.
I got that
when
from Chief Parks.
when
He
I
would
go
always say that.
when I go fishing, and I'll give a shout out here as I say that, my honorary command chief, Mr. Rob Clint, is just an incredible supporter and so passionate. And I'll give a dual shout out. If you're not familiar with Rob Clint, please go to our PA Facebook and DVids and just watch his 3-part story. It is so cool. And he's such a humble servant and just so passionate. So I learned this from Rob. But, as you said, I'm the first, the worst, and the best. I get to claim them all. Rob and I were out fishing and
Throwing car parts.
we were throwing car parts, but
Yes.
but I'll humble brag here. That morning, midday-ish, surprising time, but we were hunting that morning, and I got the best deer of my life.
Oh, wow.
A nice 10-pointer
Wow.
from 340 yards, and Rob was spotting me and helping me, and it was awesome. And so he said, "Well, hey, Chief, you got a good one. You want to call today, or we can hang out and fish at a couple of the ponds?" And so we started fishing, and he said, contest every time we fish, it's the first fish, the most fish, and the biggest fish.
Wow.
So I count that. So I like when I go fishing with my kids, and or whichever one, my kids have caught on to that, and so now I'll have to remember that as well and steal that from Senior, first, best, and worst.
Yeah.
So,
It's pretty good.
so I'd like to give another shout out to Colonel Duckworth. We're just a couple weeks now from his change of command, and I'm the guy that gets to see all the behind the scenes, right? First off, I'm appreciative of him even selecting me to come here and be part of this wing, and it's been an honor, and I hope that I've served the wing well. But when we talk about depth of passion for the airmen, for the mission, and the servant heart, he has it, and I know that Colonel Harrison is going to do well, and I look forward to getting to be his wingman. But I know we're going to miss him as well, and so I'll give a shout out there. I think, a shout out to overall the airmen of the wing. Everyone from our most junior airmen, and I love meeting them at newcomers and FTAC and now RAOC, Reserve Airman Orientation Course. We have just such an incredible team, and it's proved time and time again, whether that's through our UEI capstone and how well that went, just recently down at Wessup, down at Tyndall, and the commander and I getting to hear the outbrief and seeing the extremely high success rate, and the evaluator saying we've started this thing back up over the last 18 months, and this is the best team we've seen come through here. Wow. Right, and that's active, guard, or reserve.
It's a great thing.
And I'll give a special shout out when the evaluator for maintenance came up. He said, "Pilots, I want you to hear this. You have an incredible group of professional maintainers that are by far the best I've seen," and it's so heartwarming to hear that, and I know that we put that, proof in the pudding, and so it's really neat though. But it's an honor, and we've got some faults, myself included. I'm not perfect, but overall our team is great, and I want to continue to see where we take this, and I hope that in one way, shape, or form I'll get to sneak up here for the first aircraft arrival of the F-35, and possibly down as the 44th transitions over to Tyndall. Maybe be there for their first aircraft arrival as well. So
cool. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. Well, thank you so much for listening, and I'm happy that we got to know you better, Chief Senigo. And if you're passionate about sharing your opinion about our podcast, please email us, and you can find me on the Global, Senior Master Sergeant Hansel Orozco. Enjoy your UTA and make good choices.
Or make an appointment.